coming tonight. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. I will call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is to note the roll. I can't see who's there, Troy, so I'm going to trust you to note the roll.
Yep.
I have a very special welcome, though, to Dobie, is it Giles?
Yes, Giles, yep.
Dobie Giles, welcome to the Police Commission.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
I think via Zoom you have to submit public comment ahead of time. In fact, I know you do. None was submitted to me. Troy, any to you?
I did not receive any.
In that case, I will close public comment. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
And Troy, I assume you can see who did that?
You're still muted.
Troy, can you hear me?
I can. I'm trying to manipulate too many things at once.
That's okay. That's all right.
Yes, it was Terry and was it Patrick?
Yeah, Patrick.
Okay, good. All right, great. So there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, election of president and vice president of the Middleton Police Commission. I would like to thank the commission for giving me the high honor of being president over these past few years. I'm proud of all of the hires we did. However, I would like to give someone else an opportunity to be president of the police commission. So I make a motion for Laura Albert to be president of the police commission.
I'll second that, Patrick.
Any further discussion?
I do have further discussion. This is Terry. And I just wanted to mention that although I agree that Laura would make a fine president, I did feel it was inappropriate that I received an email from the mayor last night, from his personal email very late at night to me, asking if I would consider nominating her, and I just thought that, and I did want to disclose that in this meeting, because I don't feel it's his position as mayor to sort of decide or try to persuade us to vote one way or another. He obviously is the person who recommends us for sitting on the commission and for us to be voted into the commission, but I don't feel it's his position to try to persuade us to vote one way or the other. So I did want to make that record. I do agree that Laura would make a very fine president. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Laura. I now turn the running of the meeting over to you.
Well, it's big shoes to fill, Paul. I know it's a challenge. It might be a challenging year for us, and I think I'm ready for it. And I want to do a good job for Middleton. Great. So I think the next question is to seek solicitations for vice president. Or is there a nomination?
I'll nominate Patrick.
I'll nominate Patrick.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, I think we are ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion carries.
Thank you all. I'll try and fill those shoes. Appreciate it.
All right, so the next item agenda is to convene and to close. Oh wait, no, we've got committee member contact information. I am not sure what we were supposed to do for the committee member contact information.
Laura, I can hop in here. So this was a request from City Clerk Lori Burns, just to check to make sure everybody has their current emails and addresses on file with the city for the committee, just in case they need to do any kind of correspondence. So it's just a reminder that if there's any changes, anybody's moved recently, change email addresses, that we should make that change now.
Okay. And then there's no items associated with that. Okay. All right, so the next we move into closed session. Is there a motion to do so?
Kenny moves that we go into closed session.
All right.
All right, let me just check to make sure that we have no one else in here, and then I will pause the recording before we can go into closed session.
Everyone in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
All right, the next up is, if you remember, we had approval in the 2020 budget to add lieutenants to our departments. This is something that's been mentioned in our staffing study since 2012, but prior to that, Brad Kyle, the previous chief prior to Chuck, had made a request for lieutenants in our command structure in 2010. So for 10 years, we've been trying to get lieutenants back into our process, which is pretty normal for a police department. We kind of have a gap from sergeants to captains. And what we've also noticed is our sergeants are being more and more bogged down with admin duties and not out on the streets, being that mentor and being that supervisor that we're looking for. So we've requested in the 2020 budget and is approved to promote 4 sergeants to lieutenants. So they'd be a lieutenant on first shift, second shift, third shift, and then we'd have a detective lieutenant, which is currently now a detective sergeant. So we'd like to bring forth the promotional process, which I'll turn over to Travis, who kind of took the lead on developing the process and having you guys take a look and then hopefully approving it and asking any questions. So Travis, I'll let you share your screen. Or actually, I was supposed to share these, right?
Yep.
All right, let me see if I can find them. Is there a particular one you want up first?
You can start with the announcement.
Okay.
So this will be run pretty consistently with other processes that we've done as far as how the process is going to work. So what we'll do is we'll ask all eligible sergeants to submit a resume and a letter of interest and also a promotional potential questionnaire. And we call it a PPQ for short. And just kind of a refresher, or if you haven't heard of what this is, it's a questionnaire that the candidates fill out with kind of a wide range of questions. It's kind of broken down into 2 different sections. The first section is more about, tell us about your background, any supervisory experience, education, any awards that you've received, things like that. So we get kind of a picture of what their general qualifications are for the position, just in case we overlook something or just so it's all on paper, and also to see how they articulate it on that document as well. And what we ask them to do is to put it in like a narrative or a bullet point format, so it's easy for us to read. We kind of want them to keep it somewhat short and sweet. Otherwise, these documents can get pretty long and you're reading through a lot of information. So section 1 is kind of about, basically tell us about yourself. And then section 2 of the PPQ is 10 questions, kind of more about tell us the time when type scenarios. Some of those questions have to do with, tell us about a time when you've sought self-improvement. How do you motivate coworkers, things like that. So it's a valuable document to not only show us what they come up with, but like I said, also the document kind of speaks for itself, how much time they put into it. And that's why the weight of it is significant. It's actually 50% of their overall score. We also feel like it's important because someone may not do particularly well in an interview, or the presentation, which I'll talk about in a minute, but they have a history of performing well in their current role. So in this case, as a sergeant. So that'll give us a good picture of them internally. And then so Jeremy and I will review those documents and we'll score them. And like I said, that'll be 50% of the overall score. The next phase will be an interview and presentation. And what we envision with this is, due to distancing, we'll probably use our courtroom, and we'll have it be a setup where they're going to walk into that room and have a topic predetermined, and they'll be told something to the effect of, you know, there's a particular situation that, you know, evolved the night before with the patrol officers. There's a group of citizens that are concerned about it. There's a community meeting tomorrow night that would like you to attend. The chief's not available, that type of thing. And kind of give them the topic maybe 24 hours ahead of time, enough they can prepare. And then they'll walk in the room kind of just in that mode of they're addressing that group as if it was an actual presentation. We're also planning on putting some people in a quote unquote audience to maybe have some questions for the candidates, maybe kind of put them on the hot seat a little bit, kind of, you know, as a real community meeting might be. You might have people that are upset or, you know, want some answers to some questions. So we'll kind of throw in a little bit of that too as well, just to see how they would handle that. So we're thinking that presentation about 15 minutes as the cap. And then once they're done with that, we'll kind of reset. The panel would have watched that presentation and kind of graded it to see how the candidate did. Once they're done, we'll kind of pivot, sit down, and then we'll do the interview with the same panel. And that would be approximately 30 minutes from there. So we're looking at about 45 minutes total between the interview and the presentation, and then some time for discussion and scoring of the candidates. And that section, so it would be 25% of the weight would be the actual interview, and then 25% on the presentation. Next step, so once that's all done, then we do a chief's interview with all the candidates, which would be the chief as well as Jeremy and I. And then that's not graded, but it's a chance to sit down with the candidates and just kind of go over the process, maybe answer any questions, and just kind of, like I said, go over how things went, provide maybe some feedback as well. And then finally, we'll bring it back to the police commission and have recommendations for promotions. So that's kind of the process in a snapshot there. Any questions?
Yeah, Travis, and in the PPQ, you know, those seem like good questions. But what about a question like the people we interviewed last week? You know, having something specifically dealing with the current situation that's going on with the community and such.
Right.
Did you consider maybe adding something like that, since these officers are going to be in a supervisory role? They're obviously setting the standards. You know,
Right.
but just because it was on the initial interview questions, it seems like it may be something to consider for something like that along this line.
So just so you know, I don't want to give away any questions, but that is something we're looking at for the interview. Questioning about some of the current events going on and how they would handle them.
Okay.
So it's important to get that element in for sure, to see what their thoughts are and if they have any interesting responses.
All right.
Because it is important.
Yep. Thank you.
Dobie, you're right on, and as Travis said, that will definitely be a component of this. Since 2014, I think that has been one of our questions every single time, whether it's a promotional process or an officer process. That is, definitely very important, and it will definitely be a big part of this process too in some way.
Thank you.
How many people do you think will be applying? And then it'll be 4 positions sort of selected at once?
Laura, we don't know. There's a lot of anxiety. This This has been something that has been talked about for a while, but it really could shake up the ranks in the sergeant role. There's some that have a lot of seniority. As you saw in the announcement, is the sergeants currently how they're ranked. If they apply for lieutenant and they're the top 4 lieutenants, they're going to be promoted based on their current seniority now, because that's been a lot of concerns from the sergeants of, I've been working day shift for 5 years, could I end up back on third shift again? We don't know. I think we're going to have a majority of them apply, but there's also that anxiety of, boy, I'm in a pretty good spot right now, and do I really want to go back to third shift or second shift where it doesn't work for my family? But we do feel that we'll have at least 4 candidates, if not more than that. But yeah, this is not ideal, and we knew there'd be some heartburn the first time that we promoted lieutenants, but in the long run for the department, this is the best thing for us.
How many sergeants do you currently have?
8, right?
Yep.
Okay. And if 4 get promoted to lieutenant, then you'd be replacing the 4 sergeants, or?
Nope, it's actually the 4 lieutenants are just being promoted out of the sergeant ranks. There's no replacement. It's just a retitle for the sergeants.
Okay, so it's still a big change, but it's not quite as big as I thought maybe a minute ago.
Yes.
The big advantage will be, because right now there's not really a clear, because there's 2 sergeants on each shift, and some of the officers get confused about, well, who should I go to with this issue? Who's in charge of the shift? So that'll be the big thing. It'll kind of create a clearer chain of command. And then the other thing too is it'll get the sergeant back on the street a little bit more, because right now there's a lot of collateral duties in the office, whereas with the lieutenant, you could probably, or we will, give that position more of the office-driven duties, and get that patrol sergeant back out, where they belong, mentoring and supervising out on calls.
And just to follow up on that, one of the critiques of the Minneapolis incident is that supervisors weren't out, or because of the size of the department, they're not out mentoring, supervising those more critical incidents. That was obviously a goal of ours from the beginning, getting lieutenants, but I think it's even more important now with what happened in Minneapolis and what's going on in society, that we make sure that we have supervisors out there monitoring those critical incidents, and again, guiding a lot of our younger officers who've only been an officer for a couple of years, but giving them the proper guidance, making sure that they're following our policies and procedures. So this is more important than it has ever been, to get our sergeants back out on the road and be in the mix with our staff while they're taking calls.
Okay, I appreciate the proactive side of this. It's good to hear that. My other question is sort of retrospectively, this, you make these changes, how will you evaluate if it's working well?
I think what's happening now, like Travis said, is not working well. We have a lot of issues. It's been an issue for a while that we have 2 sergeants who, when they're both working, they're overlapping. There's a lot of confusion. Some sergeants who are less senior are afraid to make a decision. They're deferring to the more senior sergeant. Our current setup does not work well at all. There's been a lot of issues. So I don't envision this not working. The biggest issue is going to be the change and 4 people being moved. And I think that's what we're hearing from the sergeants is just that anxiety of, where am I going to be next year for a shift? I kind of knew going into this year, but I don't know where I'm going to end up in this process, if I'm going to get promoted, if not, and then where do I go if I don't get promoted. But we'll constantly evaluate it. But I think based on the evaluation we've done on this and the recommendation from our staffing study twice in the last 6 years that this needs to happen, that we feel pretty confident that it's going to be successful.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, so I have next on the agenda the approval of the lieutenant promotional process. Oh, yes, I believe. So it sounds like we have to formally approve the process here.
I'll move to approve.
To approve.
Great.
Second.
All right, thank you both. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. So I think our last couple of items here are the department update.
Thanks, Laura.
Brand.
It's just a couple things, and I open it up for questions. I'm sure there's a lot of questions from the commission members, and with everything going on, I'd be happy to answer some of those. But just kind of give you an update on COVID. So with everything else going on, I sometimes forget that COVID is still kind of a major thing in our society and in our department. The staff is still pretty concerned about it. We've still modified a lot of our practices. We're not going on EMS. Well, we go on EMS calls, but we're not going in with paramedics unless they're requesting us. We're still trying to do a lot of our calls for service if we can by telephone. We still limited contact with folks in our lobby to make sure that our staff isn't being exposed. They're still being informed that they need to be wearing PPE gear, and there's still a lot of concerns from our staff of getting COVID and how that will impact them and in our department. So far, we've been very fortunate. We're not aware of any of our staff being infected with COVID, being positive. We've had a couple close calls, but for the most part, we've been pretty lucky, and I'm hoping it stays that way. We initially had staff working from home, and then we brought them back probably about a month ago. And Travis and Jeremy, hop in here, and if I'm missing anything, please state what I'm missing. But then with the new mask order, we had a request from some of our civilian staff to work back from home again. So we have, I think right now, 3 of our full-time staff working from home. And I think probably the one positive thing from COVID is that we've been able to figure out that we can operate with our staff working remotely. There was maybe some minor hiccups, but for the most part, it's gone really, really smooth, and that we can continue to operate. Zoom meetings have been our friends too. We've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of emails, OneDrive. We can really coordinate things remotely, which has been nice. And again, that's probably the one positive thing from COVID, if there's anything positive. And I think as far as calls for service, I think initially it was down. We were seeing kind of a lull in our calls for service, but Travis and Jeremy can probably back me up on this. I don't see that anymore. Our calls for service are as high as they would previous to COVID. And in fact, maybe we're seeing some more increase of crime because of some of the anxiety going on in society. Some of the more free time that some of the kids in our community have, not going to school. We're definitely seeing an uptick in the last week of theft from autos and theft of autos, along with burglaries. And as it has been the case the last couple of years, it is really related to a number of juveniles, some living in our community and some living in other suburbs in the city of Madison. But that is still a very big issue for us. And I think the last 2 or 3 nights, Travis and Jeremy, that's all our third shift has been dealing with, is stolen vehicles, a bunch of cars being broken into and stolen from residences in Middleton. But definitely we've seen, I think, the normal call activity that we were seeing prior to COVID-19, but I think, and an increase of mental health calls for service. Yet there's still a lot of people suffering, a lot of anxiety and depression, and I don't see that going away anytime real soon. Travis, Jeremy, anything else you want to add?
I think the other factor too is, when the unrest was downtown, we were sending a number of our officers down there too. There was one night when we sent 10 officers, so that was definitely a strain on us. And then as little things pop up, for example, the march through Middleton a couple of weeks ago, I mean, it went smooth, and we were heavily involved in it, and I'm glad we were, but it was kind of it took a lot of resources to pull it off. So we were happy to do it, but definitely took a lot of coordination to close University Avenue and Park Street. But like I said, it was a good event, and I'm glad that we did it. And then the whole box situation has been creating some activity for us as well, even though we're not directly involved in it. Like, for example, on Saturday morning, there was a protest, and we didn't know if 10 people were going to show up or if 1,000 people were going to show up. So we ended up holding over our entire third shift, and also had some people come in early from second shift, just because we didn't know. We just didn't want to have minimum staffing and then get caught with some unrest. So yeah, little things have popped up here and there. Definitely society is an interesting place, and we've had to kind of deal with that. But definitely, I would agree with the chief that the calls have been picking up noticeably lately, it seems like.
I would just add to our, even at the early stages of COVID situation where our call for service were down, our calls to the police department that come into our communication center had actually increased. There was, as you guys are very well aware, a ton of uncertainty on what is allowed, what isn't allowed. This continues now to this day, of course, since the mask order. Our comm center frequently gets calls that we won't dispatch an officer to, but they are the central point. When somebody doesn't know what to do or who to call, it's generally the police department, and then we tell them where they need to go, who to talk to, and direct them accordingly. So again, just because our calls for service were down doesn't mean our calls into our department followed suit.
Yeah.
What's about the mental health calls being up? In Madison, the domestic calls are up, and then in Dane County and nationwide, like overdoses and opioid related calls are up, which is kind of scary. I don't know how much we're seeing here.
You know, I don't think we've seen a huge increase of our opiate overdoses. I definitely think domestics have been up recently again. And again, I definitely saw an increase in our mental health calls for service. That was that we've had some pretty significant mental health calls that we haven't seen in a number of years, but people are really, really struggling. And yeah, the depression is a big issue right now too. It's definitely, we're seeing an uptick of those.
Sergeant, you mentioned that you weren't heavily involved in the Hallbecks incident, but who issued the fine for not wearing masks there? Wasn't it the Middleton Police Department?
It's actually the Dane County Public Health.
County?
So,
is it Dane County? Okay.
yep. So they actually, they came out there and basically we stood by and kind of just made sure that everything was smooth. We met them and just walked in and kind of just stood on the side and made sure our cameras were rolling on the body cameras, and let them do the interaction, because it really has nothing to do with us. They haven't asked for any assistance with mask enforcement, so they are dealing with it by themselves.
So thank you for being there, and thank you for what you did for the march too. I think that's extremely important. I am curious about what the Middleton Police Force is doing when folks aren't adhering to the mask order. Then I know you say you're letting Dane County do what they need to do. Will you approach folks and say, just a reminder, the order is in place, or how are you handling that?
We really haven't been. We've been referring everything to Dane County, and it's kind of at their directive. They wanted everything sent to them, and I was actually a bit surprised as we report things. They've actually been pretty good about feedback. Like with the Hellback situation, I did email them again the other day and said, just so you know, we got another complaint, and they emailed me back within an hour and wanted some more information about it. So they're actually being pretty thorough with the follow-up on those. So we've been directing people to them if they do report anything.
I read that half.
I misspoke earlier and said Sergeant. I apologize, Captain. I
Sorry.
apologize. Sorry about that, Captain.
No problem.
But thank you for your efforts there. I do think it's critical, and I am pleased to see that folks are adhering to the mask order for the most part when I've been out, which is very rare, but I do step out of the house occasionally. So thanks for what you're doing. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I saw that like half of the complaints about masks filed with the public health have been in Hellbox. So it's been a lot going on here in Middleton.
It really has been, and it has been taxing on our staff and dispatch center, because we were getting a lot of phone calls. There's a lot of expectations for us to deal with it. But again, as Travis talked about, his public health said we were not to get involved in that we were supposed to direct everybody to them and that they would handle it, which was nice, because we were really getting a lot of complaints about social distancing. When this COVID first came out, they were asking us to go on the Conservancy and to walk and tell people that you weren't 6 feet apart. We were getting calls every single day, and those are tough to enforce. And there's we talk about community policing and wanting to build good relationships, yet I can only imagine the reaction we'd get from people when we'd say, hey, you're within 6 feet and you're in violation of the safe order. And those are really difficult situations that we're put in. But those were, I'd say, daily phone calls that we're getting. So I was happy to hear that public health was willing to take the lead on the mask. And they've been doing a fantastic job when we've called them with complaints.
Yeah, the Hellback thing is creating a lot of interest, and I would say that I feel like they're on top of it. They're monitoring it closely.
Any other questions on COVID, updates on the staff there? Again, I feel like it went to the wayside, even though it was kind of our main focus for a number of months with everything else going on in society. It's still a big issue for us, something that we're still addressing. I think we've updated our operating procedure 7, 8 times, giving our staff good direction on what they need to do, giving them all the PPE gear, making sure that they're safe. But it's still kind of a major thing that we're dealing with. But any other questions on that? Our response, how our staff's doing, anything like that?
Just one more. So you had mentioned that you had some of your staff who decided that they preferred to continue to work from home, which I completely understand. How are I mean, I assume that those were office staff, right?
They were still young. Yep.
I'm sure that there's some concern among your officers going out there as well. I'm glad that the PPE is plentiful and that they're well equipped, but have you had folks concerned about going out in public?
As officers? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We have some staff that is very concerned about getting COVID, exposing family members, their kids, elderly parents that they may be residing with. I think we definitely have a handful of officers that would prefer not to be working right now, but we've kind of left it up to them. So we're not making a mandatory. I wouldn't say we make mandatory traffic stops, but we have a goal of 1.5 traffic contacts a shift, and we've eliminated that, saying that if you feel comfortable making traffic stops, please do so. If you don't, if you're afraid of being exposed to COVID, please don't. Saying that, we also say if you see a pretty serious violation, you need to make a stop. But the proactive stuff that some of our officers were doing, we definitely have some officers concerned about making contact with citizens and being exposed to COVID. So we've really tried to limit that and balance that with public safety, yet making sure that our staff's not being put in a number of situations where their exposure increases. So it's been kind of a tough balancing act as we kind of navigate this COVID world that none of us have ever had to deal with before.
Sorry. And is there an avenue for officers who might be at higher risk to adverse effects of COVID to work in other places or not work out in the field, so to speak? For instance, if they have pre-existing medical conditions?
We haven't had that request, and I don't think we currently have any officers. Not that we can ask them if they do, but I think the main thing is just being exposed and getting it, and not knowing if you have it, and then giving it to family members, kids, wife, elderly parents. I think we have had an officer who came and provided us with some documentation that them acquiring COVID would be a very serious health risk for them. We look at other options, but we have not had any officers approach us with that at this point. Any other questions on COVID? All right. I will just give everybody a brief update on the SRO agreement. Paul, feel free to hop in here too, as you have some background on this. So the school board voted, and I believe that was in June, to unanimously approve the SRO agreement that we've had in place for a number of years. And if you haven't heard, we've had an SRO in our high school, and as part of the agreement partnership with the school district for 35 years, since mid-1980. Chuck Falk was actually one of the first SROs, and we do have a funny picture of him back in the day at Creamery with some of the secretaries being one of our first SROs. So we've had a really wonderful and good SRO program for 35 years. Actually, the three of us from the PD who are on the call right now were former SROs, and from my experience, it was my best 3 years of my career. I learned so much. I built so many relationships with the kids. And many of them still contact me to this day. A couple weeks ago, one of them who has special needs reached out to me just to see how he's doing, and then he asked if I could come over and play video games. Individual that I've done that before when I was working patrol, I'd stop over and play video games with them. So those relationships that we build are amazing, and is due solely to the fact that we're in the school and building those relationships with the kids. It is, we have a philosophy. It's not about making arrests. It never has been. It's about building relationships, guiding kids, getting to know them, being mentors. Many of us become coaches when we're over there. I helped coach the girls and boys wrestling program when I was at SRO. It's all about being another person, another resource for the students in that school. But the agreement was passed by the school board. It went in front of the city council, who had a lot of questions, a lot of feedback. But Paul, did you have something to say?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Okay. The city council got a lot of feedback. I think more, a lot of frustration that those opposing the SRO program didn't get an opportunity to be heard by the school board. Based on those concerns, members of the city council ended up in a tie, and the mayor broke the tie, and they voted down the SRO agreement, and with the hope of the school board listening to those in our community, getting some feedback, and hearing the concerns of those who thought that an SRO was not needed in our schools. So in the last 2 weeks, I've been doing a lot of talking to alders, answering a lot of questions, getting a lot of emails from those who were upset that the SRO agreement was voted down. And then on Monday night, the school board met, and they approved a revised SRO agreement, and the revision was in a paragraph where it was added that the school district and the police department would revisit and evaluate the SRO program annually. On Tuesday, and that was voted and passed by the school board. And then on Tuesday evening, the alders from the city council decided that they wanted to do a reconsideration vote. Two of the alders who voted against it wanted to reconsider their vote so that they could have a discussion on the SRO agreement. There was a presentation by the alumni group from the Middleton High School, and also a presentation by myself, Dana Minogue, the superintendent from the school district. Some of our SROs, former SROs, retired Chief Chuck Bulk came back, and we presented on our SRO program, how successful it's been, our goals, the history of it. And in the end, the city council, all the alders voted in favor of the reconsideration vote. So basically means that the SRO agreement is back alive, but they are now waiting for the new agreement from the school district, and then they'll vote on that probably in September or October. We're going to actually give this a little time to rest. We're going to solicit some feedback from community members. We're going to develop a really good evaluation tool so we can look at our program, make any changes where needed, and then hopefully in September or October bring back the new SRO agreement, and then hopefully get it passed by the city council. So that's kind of the gist of it. Paul, anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. And Dobie, just so you know, I'm also on the school board. So that's why I'm being, that's where I get my base of knowledge to comment further. September, October might be a little ambitious, just because being able to meet face to face with people and kind of engage in that kind of intimate conversation is a little slowed by the fact that the COVID virus forces distancing. But it's not even really a correction. It's just kind of a little warning there. Yeah, the school board wants a very robust and frank conversation about the program, and then we'll get the findings from that committee, and we will incorporate them into a new contract and suggestion for the city council to approve.
Thanks, Paul. And with the school year starting virtually, we do have some time, which helps us. There's no need for our SROs in the school right away. So yeah, Dana and I spoke the other day, and I think the best approach is to really take this slow, get community feedback, make any needed changes. We are very open at the police department to make any changes that are needed. I can tell you that I have not received any feedback from any community members that our program is broken. I think the only critique I've received is that they wish that we were in plain clothes, and we've already made a decision internally that that is not an issue and that they will be in plain clothes when we go back into the school. And just to give you a little background on that, we were in plain clothes for many, many years. And then about 5-6 years ago, the school district approached us and said that they thought it'd be helpful for our staff to be in our regular uniform, as staff and students felt safer with a police officer knowing that they were in uniform in the building, ready to protect them if something happened. And that was about the time that there was quite a few school shootings, a lot of violence in our society. So that was a request made by the school district, which we completely agreed with, and we went into uniform. So actually plain clothes is what we were in for many years. That's what I was in 20 years ago. And until 5 or 6 years ago, that's when we made the change. So we are very open to any criticism, any suggestions. We want this to be a successful program. We know how beneficial it is to those in our community, especially our youth. We teach classes. If you shadow one of our SROs, especially the high school, it is a super busy position, and kids are just constantly stopping in and chatting with them and passing on information, giving fist bumps, and it's amazing the relationships we make in that school. And Jeremy and Travis can contest to that. Is as busy as it is, the relationships we build is, there's no other community policing program that we can provide this community that has that type of outreach and that relationship building that we have there. Travis, Jeremy, anything else you want to add with that?
I would just add that I've always described it as like our most significant community policing program that we have, much like the chief just said. But if you think about it, it's 2,000 students there, 200 plus staff every single day. That's the size of a small village city that has its own police department. And one of the unique things about, I mean, if you look at the majority of our command staff, sergeant and above, almost all of them have been an SRO at some point. I think it provides them an opportunity to, it was described to me by former Captain Steve Britt, it's like you are the chief of that area. You get to make all those decisions. Of course, there's assistance for you and whatnot, but just those relationships and that the ability to have contact with that many young kids and have positive contacts many of the times. Like the chief said, just late last fall, somebody contacted me and just said, I got a question. Can you give me a call? It was a kid that I actually had written citations to in the past. He had some issues and I dealt with them. So developing those relationships is priceless in my eyes.
Yep, I would just agree with all of that. I think just to close on it, one of the neatest things is when you first get there as the SRO, you know, there's 2,000 kids in the school and you don't know any of them, but pretty quickly within, you know, the first quarter, even into the halfway point of the year, you start to really put names with faces and get to know the kids, and they know you and you're saying hello in the halls when you go in the lunchroom. And then they actually get to a point where they come by your office proactively just to talk and see how things are going. And that's always pretty rewarding when they do things like that, like they want to reach out and to have those positive contacts. So definitely a great program, and hopefully we can get it back on track.
Just also mention, so our SRO position has been the busiest position in our department for many, many years, as long as I've been with Middleton. So we average about 350 calls for service at the high school a year. And those calls won't go away if we have an SRO, that those calls are going to continue. Those are thefts, that's batteries, that we have fights at the schools with kids. We have kids who report sexual assaults to us on Monday morning that happened over the weekend, but they didn't feel comfortable calling the police agency because they didn't know those officers, but they feel very comfortable reaching out to our SRO on Monday morning and reporting those. So those calls for service aren't going to disappear, and in fact will probably increase as the school gets bigger. I think some of the estimates I've heard is 3,600 kids potentially in that building in the next couple of years, and it will be one of the biggest high schools in the state. So, and as far as arrest, we very seldom make physical arrest out of there. We make some criminal referrals, and that is due to a number of factors. Our municipal court can't offer some of the services that our district attorney's office can. So we'll get requests from social workers for kids who are struggling with drug and alcohol treatment, anger management, who have already been in the system and have a social worker. They want them referred to the juvenile authorities so that they can get further assistance. We have kids who are on probation already, and when we contact their caseworker, they want them referred up to the DA's office. And we have parents who reach out to us and say, I don't know what else to do with this kid. We're at our wit's end. We've tried citations, we've tried consequences. There's nothing else we can do. Can you get them into the system so we can get some services? So we average about 15 criminal referrals a year out of 350 some cases, but those are pretty significant cases. Again, substantial batteries, batteries to teachers, resisting, obstructing. Those are pretty significant cases. That a dangerous weapon on school property. Those are cases that the public isn't usually aware of, but they do happen in our school environment, and we want to make sure that everybody's safe and that it's still a really good learning environment for the majority of the kids. So any other questions on the SRO program?
I have a comment, and I've always thought your SRO program has been amazing, and that relationship that we have with the schools is so important and critical. And I think that the reason our schools are so good is why so many people want to move to Middleton. I was surprised when I spoke with my children about the SRO position, and their perspective is quite different. I'm very happy to hear that you are considering going back, or will go back to plain clothes, and are considering other potential alterations or changes to the SRO program to take in the students' perspective. I think that students of color have felt quite intimidated by the SRO presence, which I had no idea about, and just learning from my kids and their thoughts of what their friends feel brought that to my attention. So it's nice to hear and to make sure that we are engaging the students and hearing how we can best manage the program. So thank you for considering their opinions on this as well.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I think that I am a supporter of the program, and I think that it's to move away from it would be a very significant misstep. Having 3 kids in the schools, as well as my wife as a substitute teacher, I was very concerned that would change, particularly hearing from my high schooler, my middle schooler, about the things that go on at the school periodically, and the thought of leaving a substitute teacher or some other staff member to handle those issues was very concerning to me. And having been in a high school that had an SRO program, and having seen the benefits from my son's friends as well, I am very supportive of it. I think that it's always prudent to revisit and to think about ways to do things better, particularly in light of the significant change that our communities are going through right now, and have been over the past number of years, and to take this as an opportunity to revisit some things. And I know I've talked with the chief on a couple of occasions about this over the last number of weeks, and I really appreciate his openness and willingness to engage in these conversations, to solve problems, and to try and explore ways that we can move forward on this together. And so I just want to thank Troy for all the extra hours that he's put in, as well as the other officers who have supported him in this effort, engaging in what at times seems to be a pretty adversarial conversation, when I don't know that necessarily needs to be the case. So I really appreciate your leadership throughout this experience.
Thanks, Patrick.
Troy, I talked to you separately about my thoughts on this, and both of my daughters are recent graduates of the high school, and they love their school resource officer. They talk highly about both of them, and so I thought it was a no-brainer when we sat down and we were having dinner, and I was like, I can't believe that this fell through. This makes no sense. And despite how they feel about their own school resource officers, they said they had several friends who felt uncomfortable around them. And I was like, why in the world? And they said, Dad, they don't live in our neighborhood. They live in other neighborhoods, and they're just really uncomfortable. And it made me think, about, looking at it from the different points of view. I appreciated my daughters for speaking up instead of just agreeing with what I thought was the right thing. So I appreciate that you guys are listening to this, and maybe the plain clothes and some other things. What I thought was a no-brainer wasn't, and it was an education point for me. So, but I appreciate what the school resource officers do. I think they're a valuable component.
Thanks, Douglas.
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of the points already made. I did watch the video, and a couple of in particular, the students that talked were rather moving. And, you know, it's interesting that there's so many different perspectives in the community. I've always been a fan of the SRO program, in particular because of the way it's talked about by Troy and the other officers as an opportunity to build relationships. And I think that's a good way to frame it, and I'm glad it's being run that way. Having said that, SRO programs I know come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. They definitely took a turn after Sandy Hook and some other incidents. So I'm very professorial about everything, but I looked it up a little bit and what best practices are. And it was good to see that the program here follows some of the best practices really closely, like having an MOU in place that clearly defines the role, not using the SRO for like school disciplinary action, and having an assessment program in place. And there is an assessment program in place every 2 years, and it sounds like it's moving to every year. And then also having specialized training. So I don't know about the specialized training piece, but I was happy to see that some of these pieces were really consistent with how to do the SRO program really well. I'm glad to hear about the plain clothes too. And my last ride along, which is with the Middleton police, it involved visiting some people from vulnerable populations and trying to get them into actually drug treatment. And one of the tricks they learned was that it was really critical to have somebody other than a police officer go with, and then have the police officer in plain clothes. And it was really interesting to see that people were really fearful of being around police officers. And so it was just really helpful to kind of see that in person. And I'm glad to hear that, that's going to be reconsidered. I think that's the way to go, is to recognize that the SRO program comes in different sizes and flavors, and to revisit it, do continual improvement. I think those are positive steps. I'm thinking, though, that this coming year with the pandemic, it will be really hard to achieve those goals and to build those relationships, even if the officer gets back to school. I mean, the whole school year might be crazy. And it's a great opportunity when they're all there in school to be where the students are. But I don't know what other ways to build relationships with high school age kids this year, if there are any other things that you're thinking of outside the box. I keep hearing that you want to build relationships with them, and I really applaud that. And I'm excited about some out of the box ideas if you have them.
Kenneth was already planning, so he's the SRO at the high school. He was planning with Peg Schumacher, the principal, to go to West Madison, where we see some of the juveniles who are really struggling in the high school. High school situation is it's a really challenging time for them to go into such a big school, and they struggle. So Kenneth has already talked about going with Peg over to their community center, reaching out to them, being open, having conversations. And unfortunately, that obviously took a back seat with everything going on. But that was his goal. We're also kind of, we're talking about, and we've talked about it before, is establishing a restorative practices or court at the high school. It's been discussed 2 previous times, but because of other issues or because of staff turnover, it has never developed into anything more than a couple conversations. But I think that's really important for us to have some type of restorative court or peer court at the high school, especially for some of those minor offenses that, it might be something that should receive a citation, but maybe it's more appropriate for that first or second offense to refer that juvenile to some type of peer court where there's a consequence that is provided to them by their peers, but not involving a citation or law enforcement. So that's definitely something that we're looking at. I've been disappointed that it hasn't developed, because I've been part of 2 or 3 meetings with high school staff, and the conversation started, but it never materialized into anything more than that. But I think that would be really beneficial at the school, and it would eliminate us from getting involved in cases that we really should be getting involved in.
That sounds great. I'm glad you're at least a step ahead of me, if not more.
Thanks, Laura. Any other questions on our SRO program? Paul, anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I think we've covered it. You covered it great, and the school board is looking forward to hearing the recommendations from the committee and taking the steps that are best for the program and the community.
Thanks, Paul, and I agree. That's kind of all I had. What other questions do the commissioners have? Anything else about everything going on, about the department? Anything else we can answer for everybody? I take that as there's no other questions. It's great.
I think we entertain ideas for future agenda items. All right, well, I guess if anybody comes up with one later, they can email me. And I will work with Lynn to get an agenda put together. It sounds like there will be a meeting at some point in the future with some of these hires. All right, so we're at the end of our agenda. I believe we just need a motion to adjourn.
Kinney, so moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you, everyone. It's nice seeing you all remotely, and it's very nice having you, Joby, on the committee. Welcome.
Welcome, Joey.
Thank you. It was a very nice meeting. Have a good evening.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I, we all have to go outside like Patrick.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.